when a small mountain village discovers starving bears wandering dangerously close to their homes, fear grips the community. But as they begin to understand the desperate situation of these majestic creatures, something extraordinary happens. The villagers make a decision that defies conventional wisdom, and what unfolds next will challenge everything we think we know about human-wildlife relationships. What drives an entire community to risk everything to help these dangerous predators? And how will their courageous choice transform both the bears and themselves? Sarah Mitchell stifled a yawn as she reviewed the last set of wildlife reports on her desk. The old clock in her ranger station ticked steadily toward 9 p.m., its rhythm mixing with the soft hum of her computer monitor. Through the station's frost-covered windows, darkness had settled over Pine Valley, the small mountain community she'd served as head ranger for the past decade. Just these final notes, she muttered to herself, documenting observations about recent elk migration patterns. The day had been routine, trail maintenance, tourist guidance, and updating the park's safety bulletins. Tom Reynolds, her assistant, ranger, gathered his gear near the door, ready to end his shift. The station felt peaceful, wrapped in the familiar scent of pine and worn leather that seemed to permeate everything in the mountain outpost. "Almost done with the migration reports, Sarah. Need anything else before I head out?" Tom asked, adjusting his heavy winter coat. "No thanks, Tom. You can go home. I'll just finish these." The sharp ring of the emergency line cut through the quiet evening air. Sarah's hand hesitated over the receiver. Late-night calls usually meant trouble, and trouble meant saying goodbye to her plans for a quiet evening with hot chocolate and the latest wildlife conservation journal. Tom paused. By the door, his keys jingling in his hand. "Want me to get that?" "I've got it." Sarah picked up the phone. "Pine Valley Ranger Station, Ranger Mitchell speaking." "Sarah." The voice on the other end was breathless and worried. It was Jack Weber, who owned the general store on the edge of town. "You need to come quick. There's a bear, no, 3 bears, right at the edge of town. They look desperate, Sarah. Never seen anything like it." Sarah sat up straighter, reaching for her notepad. "Can you give me more details about their condition, Jack?" "They're skin and bones, Sarah, barely moving. One looks like it can hardly stand. I've lived here 40 years, never seen bears looking this bad. They're right by my store, and I've got customers inside." Jack's voice cracked slightly. "Don't think they'll make it much longer without help. Stay inside, keep everyone calm. I'm on my way," Sarah said firmly. "Don't let anyone approach them." Tom had already set his keys down and was pulling on his heavy-duty gloves. Bear situation. 3 of them by Weber's store. Jack says they're severely malnourished. Sarah started gathering equipment, tranquilizer gun, medical kit, and various tools they might need for a wildlife emergency. Her mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps the drought had affected their pre-hibernation feeding, or maybe disease had weakened them. The minutes ticked by slowly as they drove through the darkened streets of Pine Valley, their heavy-duty ranger vehicle cutting through the thick blanket of snow that had fallen earlier that day. Sarah's thoughts turned to the unusual weather patterns they'd experienced that year. The extended drought followed by early winter storms. The bears should have been deep in hibernation by now. They arrived at Weber's general store exactly 12 minutes later. A small crowd had gathered despite the late hour and bitter cold, maintaining a respectful distance from the 3 dark shapes huddled near the store's dumpster. Jack burst out of the store's front door as soon as he spotted their vehicle, his, weather-beaten face creased with concern. "Thanks for coming so quick, Sarah. They haven't moved much since I called. Never seen bears this close to town, not in all my years here." Sarah gestured for the onlookers to move back as she retrieved her equipment. "Everyone needs to get inside. Bears in this condition can be unpredictable." The crowd reluctantly retreated, though many remained watching through store windows. Under the harsh glare of the store's security lights, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The bears were indeed in terrible condition, their fur patchy and dull, their frames showing clear signs of severe malnutrition. The largest one, presumably the mother, lay on her side, her breathing shallow and labored. The two smaller bears, likely yearlings, stood swaying weakly nearby, their eyes glazed with exhaustion. "Where exactly did they come from?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady as she began assessing the situation. The bears showed no sign of aggression, barely acknowledging their presence, a worrying indication of their depleted state. Jack shifted, his weight nervously, snow crunching under his boots. "First spotted them coming down from Miller's Ridge. No aggression, no attempt to get into garbage even. Just collapsed here." Tom had already started preparing the tranquilizer gun and gathering medical supplies, his experienced hands moving efficiently. But Sarah caught the concerned glance he shot her way. These weren't ordinary cases of bears wandering into town looking for easy meals. Something was very wrong. "We'll do everything we can," Sarah assured the growing crowd of concerned townspeople, who had begun to gather despite the late hour and bitter cold. Some had brought blankets, others thermoses of hot coffee for the rangers. The community's concern was palpable. After the initial assessment, Tom moved closer to Sarah, speaking quietly. "Sarah, are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Sarah watched the labored breathing of the mother bear, noting how the security lights cast strange shadows across her protruding ribs. The bear's condition, their unusual behavior, their presence so close to town during what should have been hibernation. It all painted a disturbing picture of just how desperate these animals had become. The mother bear let out a weak moan, her massive head resting heavily on the snow-covered ground. Despite her years of experience, despite all the wildlife situations she'd handled, this one was different. This one would challenge everything Sarah knew about wildlife management and perhaps even test the boundaries of what their small community was capable of. Tom began setting up emergency lighting, his movements precise, but his expression troubled. "Should I call the state wildlife department?" he asked, though they both knew this situation might require more than their usual protocols. The security lights flickered as another snow squall moved in, and Sarah felt the weight of the moment settle around her. This was going to be a long night, and she had a feeling it was just the beginning of something much more complicated than a simple bear encounter. The entire community of Pine Valley was about to face a challenge that would test their courage, compassion, and understanding of what it means to coexist with wildlife. Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision as she prepared the tranquilizer. Darts, her breath visible in the frigid air. The bears remained eerily still, their usual wariness of humans completely absent, a testament to their desperate condition. In all her years as a ranger, she'd never seen anything quite like this, and the implications sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the winter air. Sarah's hands moved steadily as she loaded the tranquilizer gun in the harsh glare of the emergency lights, her movements measured and precise despite the tension in the air. The mother bear's labored breathing created small clouds of vapor in the frigid night, while her cubs huddled weaklessly against her massive frame. Tom worked efficiently beside her, preparing medical supplies and setting up a secure perimeter. The crowd of townspeople had grown, their whispers carrying across the snowy parking lot as they watched from behind the makeshift barrier of ranger vehicles. The scene felt surreal. 3 severely malnourished bears lying exposed and vulnerable in the heart of their mountain community. Vitals are dangerously low, Tom reported, using specialized equipment to monitor the bears from a safe distance. The mother's breathing is shallow, cubs showing signs of severe dehydration. Sarah nodded, her mind racing through their options. Standard protocol dictated minimal intervention with wildlife, but these bears were clearly on the brink of death. The bitter wind whipped around them, carrying flurries of snow that danced in the beam of the emergency lights. Mayor Helen Chen's silver SUV pulled into the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the swirling snow. The mayor stepped out, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled from the late-night call. She made her way carefully toward Sarah, her practical winter boots crunching in the fresh snow. "Ranger Mitchell," she called out softly, mindful of the bears. "Jack called me, said we had a situation." Sarah gestured for the mayor to join her behind the ranger vehicle. 3 bears severely malnourished. The mothers in critical condition, cubs not much better. They should be hibernating, but something's driven them here instead. Helen's face creased with concern as she observed the scene. "What are our options?" "Limited," Sarah admitted. "They're too weak to relocate safely. Even if we could move them, there's nowhere to take them. The wildlife sanctuary in Bristol is already overcrowded, and the rehabilitation center in Mountain View closed last month due to budget cuts." The mayor watched as one of the cubs attempted to stand, its legs trembling with the effort before collapsing back into the snow. "We can't just let them die here, Sarah. Not in front of our children's eyes." More vehicles arrived, bringing curious and concerned residents despite the late hour. Dr. James Cooper, the town's veterinarian, emerged from his truck carrying his medical bag. Though he primarily treated domestic animals, he'd occasionally assisted Sarah with injured wildlife. "Thought you might need an extra hand," he said, approaching Sarah and Helen. "I've got some supplies that might help, though I'll admit bears aren't my usual patients." The 3 of them huddled together, their breath visible in the cold air as they discussed possibilities. The standard procedures seemed inadequate for the situation they faced. These bears needed immediate intervention, ongoing care, and a safe place to recover, none of which existed in their current wildlife management framework. "The old Miller barn," Jack Weber suddenly spoke up, having joined their conversation. "It's been empty since Joe passed last spring. It's secure, isolated, and big enough. His widow Martha would probably let us use it." Sarah frowned, considering the unprecedented suggestion. Housing wild bears in a private structure, the liability alone— "I'll handle the paperwork," Helen interrupted, her jaw set with determination. "These bears are part of our mountain ecosystem. If they die, it affects all of us." Dr. Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "The barn would allow us to provide controlled care, monitor their recovery. It's better than leaving them exposed in this weather." Sarah felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Everything in her training warned against this level of intervention with wild animals. Yet as she watched the mother bear's shallow breathing and the weakened cubs, she knew they were out of conventional options. Tom approached with the latest vital signs readings, his face grim. "Temperature's dropping, Sarah. If we're going to do something, it needs to be now." The next hour passed in a blur of coordinated activity. Martha Miller was contacted and readily agreed to the use of her barn. Community members mobilized with remarkable efficiency. Trucks were offered for transport, blankets and tarps appeared from nearby homes, and volunteers helped clear a path to the barn. Sarah supervised the delicate process of tranquilizing the bears, starting with the cubs. Dr. Cooper monitored their vital signs throughout the procedure, making quick adjustments to account for their weakened state. The mother bear made no attempt to protect her cubs, a heartbreaking indication of her depleted condition. Moving the bears required careful coordination. The cubs, though yearlings, were still massive animals. The mother bear presented an even greater challenge. Special equipment was borrowed from the local construction company, and experienced handlers from the community stepped forward to help. The old Miller barn, located on the outskirts of town, was quickly transformed into a makeshift wildlife recovery center. The spacious interior provided enough room to separate the bears while keeping them within sight of each other. Fresh straw was laid down, heating lamps were installed, and emergency medical equipment was set up. As Sarah helped position the unconscious mother bear in her designated space, she couldn't help but marvel at how quickly the community had come together. People who normally argued about parking tickets and noise ordinances were working side by side, united in their desire to help these magnificent creatures. Dr. Cooper worked efficiently to set up IV lines for fluids and nutrients. "They're severely dehydrated," he explained, checking the mother bear's vital signs again. "The next 24 hours will be crucial." Mayor Helen Chen had already begun making calls, reaching out to wildlife experts and government agencies. The situation would need careful documentation and proper permits, even if they were obtained retroactively. By midnight, the immediate crisis had stabilized. The bears were secure in the barn, receiving emergency medical care under the watchful eyes of Dr. Cooper and a team of volunteers. Sarah stood in the barn doorway, watching the steady rise and fall of the mother bear's chest, now stronger with the help of fluids and warmth. Tom joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You know this is just the beginning, right? If they survive the night, we're looking at weeks, maybe months of care." Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, its warmth seeping through her gloves. "I know. This goes against every protocol we have. But sometimes the rules aren't enough. Sometimes you have to listen to your instincts." The barn had taken on an almost reverent atmosphere. Community members spoke in hushed voices as they helped organize supplies and set up monitoring schedules. The bears' presence, even in their weakened state, commanded respect. Outside, the snow had finally stopped, revealing a sky filled with brilliant stars. Sarah could hear the murmur of conversations as people reluctantly began heading home. Many promising to return in the morning with supplies and offers of help. This night had changed something in Pine Valley. The community's response to these desperate animals revealed a capacity for compassion and cooperation that transcended their usual small-town dynamics. As Sarah prepared for what would undoubtedly be a sleepless night of monitoring their patients, she realized they had crossed a threshold. There would be challenges ahead, medical, logistical, and ethical, but they would face them together. The soft beeping of medical equipment mixed with the winter wind whistling through the barn's eaves. Sarah settled into her observation post, her ranger's notebook open to a fresh page. Whatever happened next, this night would be remembered as the moment Pine Valley chose to defy convention and take a stand for the wild creatures who shared their mountain home. The dawn light crept through the barn's weathered slats, casting long shadows across the straw-covered floor. Sarah stretched in her chair, her muscles stiff from the long night of vigilance. The mother bear's breathing had steadied, though she remained unconscious from the tranquilizers. Her cubs showed the first signs of stirring, their massive forms shifting slightly under the warming blankets. Dr. Cooper checked the IV lines, adjusting the flow of fluids with careful precision. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his own sleepless night, but his movements remained steady and focused. "Hydration levels are improving," he murmured, making notes on his makeshift chart. "But their blood sugar readings are still dangerously low." The barn door creaked open, letting in a blast of frigid morning air. Tom entered carrying fresh supplies and followed by Martha Miller, the barn's owner. Her silver hair was tucked under a warm hat, and she carried a large thermos of coffee. "Thought you all could use this," Martha said, pouring the steaming liquid into cups. "How are they doing?" Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, warming her hands around the cup. "Stable for now. The next few hours will tell us more." Martha moved closer to observe the bears, her face softening with concern. "Joe would have loved this," she said quietly, referring to her late husband. "He always said these mountains belong to the bears first. We're just guests here." The morning brought a steady stream of visitors to the barn. Mayor Chen arrived early, accompanying a state wildlife official who looked both impressed and bewildered by the community's unprecedented intervention. The official, David Harrison, walked slowly around the makeshift recovery area, taking photographs and making notes. "I have to admit," Harrison said, turning to Sarah, "this is unorthodox, but given the circumstances, you may have saved these bears' lives. We'll need extensive documentation, and there will be questions from the department." Helen Chen stepped forward, her mayoral authority evident in her stance. "We're prepared to file all necessary paperwork. Our community stands behind this decision." As the morning progressed, Dr. Cooper began reducing the sedation, carefully monitoring the bears' responses. The cubs were the first to show signs of increased awareness, their massive heads lifting slightly, nostrils flaring as they processed the unfamiliar scents around them. "Easy now," Sarah murmured as one of the cubs attempted to rise. The young bear's muscles trembled with the effort, but there was more strength in its movements than the previous night. Tom stood ready with the tranquilizer gun, though the cubs showed no signs of aggression. Local media had gotten wind of the situation. A reporter from the Mountain Valley Gazette arrived, camera in hand, eager to document what she called an extraordinary act of community compassion. Sarah managed the press presence carefully, ensuring the bears weren't disturbed while allowing the story to be told. By mid-morning, the mother bear began showing signs of consciousness. Her awakening required delicate handling. A scared or disoriented bear could be dangerous even in a weakened state. Dr. Cooper adjusted her medication, seeking the perfect balance between awareness and calm. "Look at her coat," Martha observed, standing at a safe distance. "The texture, the patchiness, something's been wrong for a while. Bears don't get this thin overnight." Sarah nodded, her ranger's training kicking in. The bear's condition told a story of prolonged struggle. Their presence in town, their severe malnourishment, their delayed hibernation all pointed to a larger problem in their mountain ecosystem. Jack Weber arrived with supplies from his store, honey, fruits, and high-calorie foods that might tempt the recovering bears. "On the house," he said, waving away Sarah's attempt to pay. "Least I can do. My customers keep asking about them. Everyone wants to help." The community's response continued to amaze Sarah. A local construction company donated materials to reinforce the barn's structure. The high school's environmental club organized a schedule of volunteers to assist with monitoring and maintenance. Even the town's most notorious curmudgeon, old Bill Peterson, showed up with fresh fish from his morning catch. Around noon, Dr. Cooper called Sarah over to review the latest blood work. "Their levels are still concerning," he explained, pointing to various markers on the report. "Particularly these indicators of liver function. We need to understand what caused this." Sarah's mind turned to the environmental changes they'd observed over the past year. The altered precipitation patterns, the shift in vegetation, the unusual migration behaviors of other species. Something had disrupted the bears' natural feeding patterns, leaving them unable to build the fat reserves necessary for hibernation. The mother bear's dark eyes opened fully for the first time, focusing on the humans with unexpected clarity. Despite her weakness, her gaze held the wild intelligence that Sarah had always admired in these creatures. The bear made no aggressive moves, seemingly aware of her own vulnerability and perhaps sensing the helping intentions around her. Tom approached with fresh bedding, moving slowly and deliberately. "It's remarkable," he said quietly. "In all my years of wildlife work, I've never seen anything like this. These bears should be terrified of us, trying to escape. Instead, they know," Martha interjected, her voice soft but certain. "Animals understand more than we think. They know when someone's trying to help." The cubs had managed to sit up, their movements growing stronger though still unsteady. They watched with intense interest as Jack prepared their food, their natural instincts awakening at the smell of sustenance. Dr. Cooper carefully monitored their responses, ready to adjust treatment if needed. Sarah began documenting everything, meticulously. The bears' vital signs, their behaviors, their responses to treatment. This situation would undoubtedly become a case study in wildlife management, though whether as a success story or a cautionary tale remained to be seen. Mayor Chen returned in the afternoon, accompanied by members of the town council. The political implications of their actions couldn't be ignored, but Helen remained steadfast in her support. "We'll draft an emergency measure to protect what we're doing here," she announced. "This is about more than just these bears. It's about who we are as a community." As the day progressed, the bear's improvement became more evident. The mother bear accepted small amounts of food, her movements slow but purposeful. The cubs showed increasing interest in their surroundings, though they remained close to their mother's massive form. Dr. Cooper adjusted their medication, gradually reducing the sedation while maintaining pain management and supportive care. "They're not out of danger," he cautioned, "but they're fighting. They want to live." The afternoon sun slanted through the barn windows, creating warm patches that the bears seemed to appreciate. Sarah watched as the mother bear shifted slightly, positioning herself to catch the sunlight. Even in their dire situation, these creatures maintained their dignity, their essential wildness. A small group of children had gathered outside the barn, their faces pressed against the windows in fascination. Sarah heard their excited whispers, their innocent questions about whether the bears would be okay. Their presence reminded her of the educational opportunity this situation presented, a chance to teach the next generation about wildlife conservation and community responsibility. Harrison, the wildlife official, returned with additional documentation. "We'll need to establish protocols," he explained, spreading papers across a makeshift desk. "If this works, if they survive, it could change how we handle similar cases in the future." Sarah's ranger station office buzzed with activity as the morning sun streamed through the frost-covered windows. A week had passed since the dramatic rescue of the bears, and her desk overflowed with reports, blood test results, and documentation from various wildlife agencies. She rubbed her tired eyes, focusing on the latest lab findings. Dr. Cooper entered, carrying fresh charts from his morning check of the bears. "The blood work shows significant improvement," he announced, spreading the papers across her desk. "But there's something unusual in their liver enzyme levels. I've never seen patterns quite like these." Tom looked up from his computer where he'd been logging temperature and feeding data. Could it be related to their delayed hibernation? "Possibly," Dr. Cooper replied, pointing to specific markers on the report. "But these readings suggest something more. Something environmental, perhaps." Sarah reached for her field notebook, flipping through months of observations. The drought affected berry production on the south slopes. The pine nut harvest was barely 30% of normal. But that doesn't fully explain their condition. Mayor Chen arrived for their daily briefing, her presence now a familiar part of their morning routine. The situation had drawn attention far beyond their small community, and she'd been fielding calls from national media and wildlife organizations. "The State Wildlife Department wants a full environmental impact study," Helen announced, settling into a chair. "They're sending a team next week, and the university's requesting permission to document our rehabilitation methods." Sarah nodded, though her attention remained on the lab results. The bear's recovery had been steady, but revealed troubling signs of long-term environmental distress. The mother bear's blood work showed traces of unfamiliar toxins, while her cubs displayed unusual hormonal imbalances. Martha Miller appeared in the doorway, snow dusting her wool coat. She'd become an integral part of their operation, her keen observations and quiet wisdom proving invaluable. "The morning feeding went well," she reported. "The mother bear's appetite is improving, but I noticed something about their behavior." Everyone turned to listen as Martha described how the bears reacted to certain sounds and smells. Their responses seemed altered, different from typical wild bear behavior. They showed unusual sensitivity to specific environmental triggers while remaining eerily calm around human activity. Jack Weber joined the meeting, bringing his detailed records of local wildlife sightings from the past year. As the owner of the general store, he documented countless observations from hunters, hikers, and local residents. "Look at this pattern," he said, spreading a map across Sarah's desk. Bear sightings dropped significantly in their usual feeding grounds months before they should have. It's like something drove them away from their traditional territories. The group huddled around the map, tracking the unusual movement patterns. The bear's appearance in town wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger disruption in the mountain ecosystem. Dr. Cooper pointed to specific locations. "We should take soil and water samples from these areas. If there's an environmental toxin, we need to identify it." Sarah began organizing teams for the environmental survey. The bear's predicament had unveiled a mystery that needed solving, not just for these 3 animals, but for the entire mountain wildlife population. The phone rang, drawing their attention. It was David Harrison from the State Wildlife Department. "Sarah, we've got the preliminary results from those tissue samples." His voice carried a note of concern. "You need to see this." Within an hour, Harrison's email arrived with attached documents. The room fell silent as they reviewed the findings. The bear's tissue samples showed elevated levels of compounds that shouldn't have been present in their mountain environment. "These markers," Dr. Cooper said, his finger tracing the data, "they're consistent with exposure to industrial chemicals. But there's no industrial activity for hundreds of miles." Martha's eyes narrowed as she studied the map. "Unless Joe used to talk about the old mining operations, abandoned in the 50s, but he always said they left more behind than people knew." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. If old mining contaminants were leaching into the ecosystem, their bear situation could be just the beginning of a much larger crisis. Tom pulled up geological survey maps on his computer. There were 3 major mine sites in these mountains, all officially cleaned and sealed, but that was decades ago, under much looser environmental regulations. Mayor Chen was already on her phone, contacting environmental agencies and setting up emergency meetings. The implications of their discovery stretched far beyond their original rescue mission. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office as they continued their investigation. Sarah organized the growing collection of evidence, lab results, wildlife patterns, geographical data. The bears had led them to something crucial, something that might have gone unnoticed until it was too late. Jack shared historical records from the town archives, revealing details about the mining operations that had been forgotten by most residents. Maps showed old drainage systems that connected directly to current wildlife habitats. Dr. Cooper received calls from colleagues at the State University, offering additional resources for testing and analysis. The scientific community was taking notice of their situation, recognizing its potential significance for wildlife conservation and environmental protection. Harrison arrived late in the afternoon, having driven straight from the state capital. His usual bureaucratic demeanor had been replaced by genuine concern. "This could set a precedent for how we handle similar situations," he admitted. "The department is prepared to fast-track additional resources." As evening approached, Sarah stood at her office window watching snow fall softly over the mountain landscape. The bear's appearance in town had started as a crisis of survival for 3 animals. Now it had evolved into something much more significant, a warning sign about the health of their entire ecosystem. Martha approached, holding 2 cups of hot tea. "Joe always said nature finds ways to tell us when something's wrong," she mused, handing Sarah a cup. "We just have to pay attention to the signs." The group worked late into the night, piecing together their findings. The bear's blood work, their unusual behavior patterns, the environmental data, it all pointed to a situation that required immediate attention and long-term planning. Mayor Chen coordinated with state officials, securing emergency funding for a comprehensive environmental study. The town council unanimously approved measures to support the ongoing investigation and bear rehabilitation efforts. Tom mapped out sampling locations for the environmental survey teams, while Dr. Cooper refined his testing protocols to screen for specific contaminants. Their small ranger station had transformed into a command center for what was becoming a major environmental investigation. The old Miller barn had transformed over the past 2 weeks, evolving from an emergency shelter into a sophisticated wildlife recovery center. Sarah adjusted the new monitoring equipment, checking the digital readouts that tracked the bear's vital signs. The mother bear watched her movements with alert interest, a marked improvement from her near-death state upon arrival. Dr. Cooper worked nearby, analyzing the latest round of blood samples through equipment on loan from the State University. The makeshift laboratory occupied one corner of the barn, filled with testing supplies and medical instruments that would have seemed out of place in the rustic setting just weeks ago. "These toxicology reports are fascinating," he said, looking up from his microscope. "The contamination levels are dropping, but the way these compounds have affected their metabolism, it's unlike anything in the literature." The environmental survey teams had been working tirelessly, collecting samples from across the mountain range. Their findings painted a disturbing picture of legacy contamination from the abandoned mines, awakened by changing weather patterns and groundwater movements. Tom entered the barn, stamping snow from his boots. The university team found another seepage point near Miller's Ridge. The winter thaw is making it worse, more toxins entering the watershed. The mother bear lifted her massive head, following their movements with increasing strength. Her cubs had shown remarkable improvement, their playful nature emerging as their health returned. One of them batted at an enrichment toy designed by local high school students, a sturdy ball that released treats when manipulated correctly. Martha arrived with fresh supplies, her arms full of specially prepared food. The bear's diet had been carefully crafted to support their recovery while maintaining their natural feeding instincts. "They're moving more like wild bears today," she observed, watching their powerful movements. The rehabilitation process walked a delicate line between providing necessary care and preventing habituation to humans. Every interaction was carefully planned to maintain the bear's wild nature while supporting their recovery. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Mayor Chen. The story had caught national attention, and a major wildlife conservation organization wanted to document their groundbreaking approach to bear rehabilitation. The publicity brought both opportunities and challenges. National Geographic called again, Tom mentioned, checking his notes. They're interested in the environmental impact angle, how one community's response to dying bears unveiled a larger ecological crisis. Dr. Cooper's computer chimed with incoming results from the latest tissue samples. The data showed encouraging trends, decreasing toxin levels and improving organ function. Yet questions remained about the long-term effects of the contamination. Jack Weber arrived with his weekly wildlife observation report. Local residents had become citizen scientists, documenting animal behavior patterns across the region. Their observations provided valuable data about how the environmental contamination might be affecting other species. "Spotted 3 more bears up on Carson's Ridge," Jack reported, marking the location on their map. "They're showing similar signs of distress, though not as severe." The implications were clear. Their 3 bears weren't an isolated case, but rather an alarm bell for a broader environmental crisis. The community's response had evolved from emergency rescue to comprehensive ecological investigation. Harrison, now a regular presence, conferred with Sarah about expanding their monitoring program. The State Wildlife Department had fast-tracked funding for additional research, recognizing the potential significance of their findings. "We're setting up remote monitoring stations throughout the affected areas," he explained, showing her the proposed locations. "Your bears may have helped us catch this problem before it became catastrophic." The mother bear's recovery had become a symbol of hope for the community. Her strength returned gradually but steadily, her protective instincts toward her cubs reasserting themselves. The young bears grew more active each day, their natural behaviors emerging as their health improved. Martha watched them with knowing eyes, her connection to the land spanning decades. "They remind me of the bears Joe used to photograph," she said softly. "Strong, dignified. They belong to these mountains." The afternoon light filled the barn with golden warmth as Dr. Cooper conducted his daily examinations. The bears now cooperated with their health checks, seeming to understand the routine. Their wild nature remained intact, but they displayed an unusual tolerance for the necessary medical procedures. Sarah documented every aspect of their rehabilitation, knowing their methods could become a model for future wildlife recovery efforts. The balance they'd struck between intervention and preservation of wild instincts proved that compassionate conservation was possible. The environmental cleanup efforts had begun in earnest, with specialized teams addressing the contaminated sites. The community's swift response had drawn praise from environmental agencies and sparked discussions about reviewing other abandoned industrial sites near wildlife habitats. Tom coordinated with volunteer groups, organizing educational programs about wildlife conservation and environmental stewardship. The Bear Rehabilitation Project had awakened a deeper environmental consciousness in Pine Valley. Dr. Cooper received encouraging results from the latest round of tests. The bear's liver function had improved significantly, and their blood work showed normalization of key markers. Their bodies were healing, adapting, and growing stronger. The cubs demonstrated increasing independence, exploring their enclosure with growing confidence. Their play behavior, crucial for developing survival skills, became more sophisticated and energetic. They practiced climbing, foraging, and mock fighting, all essential skills for their eventual return to the wild. Mayor Chen visited in the late afternoon, bringing news of additional support from environmental organizations. The publicity surrounding their project had sparked important conversations about wildlife conservation and environmental responsibility. "We're becoming a model for community-based conservation," Helen said, watching the bears with evident pride. "Other towns are asking how they can implement similar programs." The mother bear's progress exceeded their initial hopes. Her coat regained its healthy sheen, and her movements showed the power and grace characteristic of her species. Yet she remained alert to potential threats, her wild instincts sharp despite her extended human contact. Sarah reviewed their rehabilitation timeline, considering the next crucial phase. As the bears recovered, they would need to begin the delicate process of reducing human contact and preparing them for eventual release. Martha shared her observations of wild bear behavior from decades of mountain living, helping them understand how to support the bear's natural instincts while maintaining necessary medical care. Her wisdom proved invaluable in balancing intervention with wildlife preservation. The evening brought a peaceful quiet to the barn as Sarah completed her final checks. The bears settled into their nightly routine, the cubs curling up near their mother in a scene that looked increasingly natural and wild. 6 weeks into their unprecedented rehabilitation project, Sarah stood at the barn entrance, watching the morning sun paint the snow-covered mountains in shades of rose and gold. Inside, the bears moved with increasing strength and purpose, their recovery progressing beyond even the most optimistic predictions. Dr. Cooper arrived early, carrying new testing equipment from the university. The latest phase of their research focused on understanding the long-term effects of the environmental toxins they'd discovered. The tissue regeneration rates are remarkable, he said, reviewing overnight data. These bears are teaching us something new about wildlife resilience. The mother bear demonstrated her restored vigor by easily moving the reinforced enrichment structures they'd installed. Her massive frame, once devastatingly thin, had regained its powerful muscle tone. The cubs shadowed her movements, their own recovery evident in their robust play and increasing independence. Tom entered with the morning's environmental survey results. The cleanup efforts at the old mine sites were showing positive results, though the scope of contamination had proved larger than initially suspected. The containment teams found 3 more seepage points, he reported, spreading maps across their work table. Martha arrived with her daily observations notebook, her keen eye for wildlife behavior having proven invaluable. They're exhibiting more natural foraging patterns, she noted, watching the bears investigate hidden food puzzles designed to simulate wilderness hunting challenges. The rehabilitation program had evolved significantly, incorporating insights from wildlife experts worldwide. Their methods of combining medical treatment with preservation of wild instincts drew attention from conservation organizations and research institutions. Mayor Chen's morning update brought news of expanding support. The state legislature is using our project as a model for new wildlife protection laws, she announced. They're calling it the Pine Valley Protocol. The mother bear's progress particularly fascinated researchers. Despite her severe illness and prolonged human contact, she maintained her wild instincts. She taught her cubs vital survival skills, demonstrating natural behaviors even within the constraints of their rehabilitation environment. Harrison arrived with a team of wildlife biologists, their presence indicating the growing scientific interest in the project. The data you're gathering could revolutionize how we approach wildlife rehabilitation, he explained, observing the bears' interaction patterns. Dr. Cooper's latest blood work revealed encouraging trends. The toxin levels are nearly undetectable now, he reported. Their bodies have essentially reset their biological rhythms despite missing their normal hibernation cycle. The cubs showed increasing proficiency in natural bear behaviors, climbing, digging, and mock hunting. Their play grew more sophisticated, incorporating complex problem-solving skills they would need in the wild. Sarah documented every development, building a comprehensive record of their rehabilitation journey. Jack Weber brought reports from his network of local observers. Other wildlife species showed signs of recovery as the environmental cleanup progressed. Even saw fresh bear tracks up on Wheeler Ridge, he noted. First time in months, the afternoon brought a visit from university researchers studying the bears' adaptation to their temporary habitat. The animal's ability to maintain wild behaviors while accepting necessary medical care challenged conventional wisdom about wildlife rehabilitation. Sarah reviewed their release preparation protocols, knowing the most challenging phase lay ahead. They would need to gradually reduce human contact while ensuring the bears could survive independently. The timing had to align with natural food availability and weather patterns. Martha shared stories of wild bear behavior from her decades in the mountains, helping them refine their rehabilitation strategies. "Watch how the mother teaches them to search for food," she pointed out. "She's preparing them for freedom, even here." The environmental cleanup teams reported success in containing the mine site contamination. Their swift response, triggered by the bears' crisis, potentially prevented a larger ecological disaster. The community's mobilization became a case study in environmental stewardship. Tom coordinated with Forest Service teams to monitor wildlife movement patterns across the region. Understanding how other bears navigated the affected areas would help them plan the eventual release location. "We need to ensure they have access to clean water sources and adequate food supplies," he explained. Dr. Cooper's research expanded to include studying how the bears' exposure to environmental toxins might affect their future survival. "Their recovery shows remarkable adaptability," he noted, "but we need to understand the potential long-term impacts." The cubs grew more independent each day, though they remained closely bonded with their mother. Their size and strength increased noticeably, and their behavior showed growing sophistication in survival skills. They practiced fishing in the specially designed pool, their technique improving steadily. Mayor Chen worked with state officials to establish permanent environmental monitoring systems throughout the mountain range. The bears' crisis had sparked a broader conversation about wildlife habitat protection and environmental responsibility. Sarah observed the mother bear teaching her cubs to break open logs searching for insects, a crucial natural behavior. Despite their time in rehabilitation, the bears' wild instincts remained strong, guided by their mother's example. Harrison brought news of similar cases emerging in other regions. "Your documentation will be invaluable," he said. "Other communities are already studying your methods." The late afternoon light filled the barn as Dr. Cooper conducted comprehensive health assessments. The bears' physical recovery had progressed remarkably, but ensuring their psychological readiness for release presented new challenges. Martha watched the cubs practice climbing techniques, their movements becoming more assured and powerful. "They're remembering who they are," she said softly. "The wilderness is still in their blood." The evening brought a team meeting to discuss transition plans. They needed to carefully balance the bears' remaining medical needs with their preparation for release. Every decision required considering both immediate health concerns and long-term survival prospects. Tom presented data from the remote monitoring stations tracking wildlife movement patterns. Understanding the restored ecosystem's capacity to support the bears would be crucial for their successful reintegration into the wild. Sarah reviewed their documentation, adding notes about the day's observations. Their experience would guide future wildlife rehabilitation efforts, demonstrating the possibility of intensive medical intervention while preserving natural behaviors. The bears settled into their evening routine, their movements showing increasing confidence and strength. Their recovery represented not just a medical success, but a testament to the resilience of wildlife and the power of community action. The spring thaw arrived early in Pine Valley, bringing with it new challenges and opportunities for the bear rehabilitation project. Sarah stood in the crisp morning air, watching snow melt drip from the barn's eaves, while inside, the bears showed increasing restlessness. their wild instincts responding to the changing season. Dr. Cooper reviewed the latest health assessments, his expression thoughtful as he studied the results. "Physically, they're ready," he announced, spreading the medical charts across their makeshift office. "All vital signs are strong, body weight optimal, and blood work shows complete recovery from the toxin exposure." The mother bear demonstrated her restored strength by easily moving the heaviest enrichment equipment, her powerful muscles rippling beneath her now glossy coat. Her cubs, nearly full-grown, matched her energy with their own displays of physical prowess. Tom entered with updated environmental survey reports. The cleanup efforts had transformed the contaminated areas, and wildlife began returning to the restored habitats. "The ecosystem is showing remarkable recovery," he explained, pointing to various monitoring sites on their maps. Martha's morning observations revealed increasing signs of the bears' readiness for release. "Watch their behavior during feeding," she noted. "They're becoming more selective, more like wild bears choosing natural food sources." Mayor Chen arrived with representatives from the State Wildlife Commission, their presence marking a crucial phase in the project. The time had come to plan the details of the bears' release back into the wilderness. "The restoration work at the release site is complete," Harrison reported, sharing aerial photographs of the chosen location. "Natural food sources are abundant, and our monitoring shows no other bears currently claiming that territory." The mother bear's attention increasingly turned toward the world beyond the barn walls. Her powerful nose tested the spring air flowing through the ventilation system, and her behavior showed growing interest in natural sounds from outside. Dr. Cooper compiled final medical records while explaining their groundbreaking rehabilitation methods to visiting wildlife experts. The key was supporting their recovery while allowing natural behaviors to persist, he emphasized. "We had to resist the urge to overmanage their development." The cubs demonstrated their readiness through increasingly complex hunting behaviors, even within the confines of their enclosure. They practiced stalking, pouncing, and foraging with growing sophistication, their movements showing the natural grace of wild bears. Jack Weber brought encouraging reports from his network of wilderness observers. "The entire mountain ecosystem is rebounding," he said. "Berry patches are flourishing, fish populations are healthy, and insect activity is normal. The habitat can support them now." Sarah coordinated with the release team, planning every detail of the upcoming transition. The process would require careful timing and execution to ensure the bear's successful return to the wild. "We'll need to move them before dawn," she explained. "Minimize stress and human contact during transport." Martha shared insights from her years of observing wild bear behavior, helping them anticipate potential challenges during the release. "The mother knows what to do," she assured them. "She'll guide those cubs back to their natural ways." The afternoon brought final preparations to the release site. Remote monitoring equipment was carefully positioned to track the bear's initial movements without interfering with their natural behavior. Tom supervised the installation, ensuring everything functioned perfectly. Dr. Cooper conducted thorough final health checks, documenting every aspect of the bear's condition. "This will establish baseline data for future rehabilitation projects," he explained. "Their recovery could help save other bears." The mother bear's behavior showed increasing focus on survival skills as she worked with her cubs. She demonstrated fishing techniques in their enrichment pool, her movements precise and purposeful. The cubs watched intently, their own attempts growing more successful. Mayor Chen organized a final community meeting to discuss the release plan. The entire town had invested in the bears' recovery, and their return to the wild represented a shared achievement. "This project has changed how we view our relationship with wildlife," she noted. Harrison reviewed the tracking protocols with the monitoring team. They would use a combination of radio collars and remote cameras to study the bears' reintegration into the wild. "The data we gather will be invaluable for future conservation efforts," he explained. Sarah worked late into the evening, finalizing transport arrangements and emergency contingency plans. Everything had to be perfect to give the bears the best possible chance at successful reintegration into their natural habitat. The cubs practiced climbing and foraging skills with increasing intensity, as if sensing the approaching change. Their movements showed strength and confidence, their bodies fully recovered from their near-death experience months ago. Martha observed their final evening in the rehabilitation facility, her experienced eyes noting subtle changes in their behavior. "They're ready," she said quietly. "You can see it in how they move, how they respond to the wind. They're answering the call of the wild." Tom prepared the transport equipment, ensuring everything met their exacting safety standards. The bears would travel in specially designed crates, secure, yet allowing them to remain calm during the journey to the release site. Dr. Cooper compiled his final research notes, documenting the successful integration of medical intervention with wildlife rehabilitation. Their recovery challenges conventional wisdom about treating severely compromised wild animals, he noted. The evening light faded as Sarah made her final rounds, checking every detail one last time. The bears settled into their last night in captivity, their powerful forms relaxed yet alert, ready for the next phase of their journey. The mother bear's eyes met Sarah's briefly, showing the ancient wisdom of her species. Despite months of necessary human care, she remained truly wild, her spirit undiminished by their intervention. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around the Miller barn as Sarah and her team began final preparations for the bears' release. Stars still dotted the sky, their light mixing with the soft glow of emergency lamps as they readied the transport equipment. The air carried the crisp promise of early spring, scented with melting snow and awakening earth. Dr. Cooper arrived, first, medical kit in hand for last-minute health checks. The bears sensed the unusual activity, their massive forms moving with heightened awareness in their enclosure. The mother bear watched the preparations intently, her cubs staying close to her powerful frame. "Transport sedation needs to be minimal," Dr. Cooper explained, preparing carefully measured doses. "Just enough to keep them calm during the journey. We want them fully alert for release." Tom positioned the specially designed transport crates, their reinforced walls strong enough to contain the bear's strength while providing adequate ventilation. Each crate had been carefully sized to allow comfortable movement without excess space that might risk injury during transit. Martha appeared carrying thermoses of coffee, her eyes bright despite the early hour. She'd insisted on being present. For this final phase, her connection to the bears running as deep as anyone's. "The mountains calling them home," she said softly, watching the bear's restless movements. The mother bear's ears twitched at every sound, her powerful nose testing the pre-dawn air. Her cubs showed similar alertness, their behavior reflecting growing awareness of the impending change. Their movements carried the fluid grace of healthy, strong bears, a far cry from their desperate condition months ago. Mayor Chen arrived with Harrison and the state wildlife team, their vehicles pulling up silently in the pre-dawn stillness. The official documentation needed to be completed before transport could begin, each step carefully recorded for future reference. The release site perimeter is secured, Harrison reported, checking his tablet. Remote monitoring equipment activated and testing normal, weather conditions optimal for release. Dr. Cooper approached the enclosure with practiced calm, administering the light sedation with skilled precision. The bears accepted the procedure with remarkable tolerance, a testament to the trust built during their rehabilitation. Sarah supervised the delicate process of guiding the bears into their transport crates, her movements slow and deliberate. The mother bear entered first, her massive form flowing smoothly into the reinforced container. Her cubs followed, their behavior reflecting their mother's calm acceptance. Jack Webber appeared with last-minute reports from his wildlife observation network. All clear along the transport route, he confirmed. No other bear activity reported in the release zone. The loading process proceeded with practiced efficiency, each team member knowing their role precisely. The bears' crates were secured. In the transport vehicles, monitoring equipment activated to track their vital signs during the journey. Martha watched the proceedings with tears in her eyes, her hand resting on the barn wall. "Joe would be proud," she whispered. "This is how it should be, helping them return to where they belong." The convoy departed just as the eastern sky began to lighten, multiple vehicles moving in careful coordination. Sarah rode in the lead vehicle, monitoring the bear's status throughout the journey. The mother bear remained calm, her presence seemingly reassuring her cubs. Tom managed communications between vehicles, ensuring every phase of the transport proceeded according to plan. The route to the release site had been carefully chosen to minimize travel time while avoiding populated areas. Dr. Cooper tracked the bears' vital signs, noting their steady recovery from the mild sedation as they approached the release site. "Perfect timing," he observed. "They'll be fully alert when we open the crates." The release location emerged from the dawn mist, a remote valley rich with natural food sources and free from human activity. The team positioned the transport vehicles according to their carefully crafted plan, minimizing the distance the bears would need to travel from crate to wilderness. Harrison directed the final placement of remote monitoring equipment, ensuring comprehensive coverage without creating obvious human presence. "Remember, minimal intervention from this point forward," he reminded the team. "Let them choose their path." The sun crested the mountain ridge as Sarah gave the signal to begin the release sequence. The team moved with quiet efficiency, positioning the crates to open toward the natural cover of the forest edge. The mother bear's deep breathing echoed in the morning stillness. Martha stood beside Sarah as they prepared to open the first crate. "Look at that sunrise," she said softly. "Nature's welcoming them home." The crate doors opened simultaneously, a synchronized release allowing the bears to emerge at their own pace. The mother bear moved first, her powerful form flowing from the container with fluid grace. She paused, testing the air, her wild instincts fully engaged. The cubs followed, their movements matching their mother's cautious approach. Their muscles rippled beneath healthy fur as they took their first steps on wilderness soil, their bodies showing no sign of their near-death experience months ago. Dr. Cooper monitored their behavior from a safe distance, documenting every aspect of their release. The bears showed no hesitation, no confusion, their wild nature guiding them surely toward their natural habitat. The mother bear led her cubs toward the tree line, her movements purposeful and strong. She paused once, turning to look back at the humans who had saved her family. Her gaze held ancient wisdom, a connection between species that transcended the boundaries of wild and civilized. Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks as the bears disappeared into the forest, their dark forms melting into the shadows of their true home. The tracking collars would monitor their progress, but their future now belonged to the wilderness. The team remained silent, sharing the profound moment as the rising sun painted the valley in shades of gold. Their unprecedented project had succeeded beyond their hopes, not just saving 3 bears, but transforming their community's relationship with wildlife. Martha's voice broke the silence, carrying years of mountain wisdom. "They'll thrive here," she said confidently. "The mountains remember their own." The morning light strengthened as the team began their careful withdrawal from the release site. Every piece of human equipment was removed, leaving the bears to reclaim their place in the natural world without interference. Harrison coordinated with remote monitoring stations, confirming the bears' initial movements followed natural patterns. Their journey of recovery had ended where it should, with wild bears moving freely in their natural habitat. The convoy departed as quietly as it had arrived, leaving the valley to its rightful inhabitants. Sarah looked back one last time, catching a final glimpse of the forest that would now sustain the bears they had saved. Tom began collecting data from the tracking equipment, establishing baseline information for the bears' post-release behavior. Their scientific observations would continue, but from a respectful distance that honored the animal's wild nature. Dr. Cooper completed his final medical notes, documenting the successful conclusion of their groundbreaking rehabilitation project. The bears' recovery would provide valuable insights for future wildlife conservation efforts. 1 month after the release, Sarah sat in her ranger station reviewing data from the remote monitoring systems. The bears' progress exceeded their most optimistic expectations, their movements showing confident navigation of their new territory and successful foraging patterns. Dr. Cooper entered with fresh analysis of their post-release behavior studies. "They're displaying completely natural movement patterns," he reported, spreading maps across her desk. "The mother has established a territory that perfectly matches historic bear habitat use in the region." The tracking data revealed the bears had traveled extensively through their chosen range, utilizing various food sources and shelter locations. Their behavior showed no lingering effects from their time in rehabilitation, their wild instincts fully restored. Tom arrived with updates from the field observation teams. "Found evidence of successful hunting," he announced, sharing photographs of sites where the bears had caught prey. "Their technique matches typical wild bear behavior exactly." Martha's regular visits to the observation blinds provided valuable insights into the bears' adaptation. "They're moving just like the bears Joe used to photograph," she noted. "No sign they were ever in distress." Mayor Chen coordinated with environmental officials as their project became a model for wildlife rehabilitation. Other communities facing similar challenges sought their guidance, learning from Pine Valley's successful approach to wildlife conservation. "The university wants to establish a permanent research center here," Helen announced during their morning briefing. "They're calling it the Pine Valley Wildlife Conservation Institute." Harrison brought reports from other tracking stations throughout the mountain range. The cleanup of the contaminated sites had allowed wildlife to return to previously abandoned areas. "Your bears were the warning system we needed," he acknowledged. The mother bear's territory selection showed remarkable intuition. She'd chosen an area rich in natural food sources with adequate shelter and water access. Her cubs demonstrated increasing independence while maintaining family bonds typical for their age. Jack Weber's network of local observers provided regular updates on the bear's interactions with other wildlife. "They're part of the ecosystem now," he reported. "Saw them sharing a berry patch with another bear family yesterday. No conflict, just natural behavior." Sarah compiled their ongoing research into a comprehensive report for wildlife conservation. Agencies, their success challenged traditional assumptions about rehabilitating severely compromised wild animals. Dr. Cooper's analysis of the bears' hunting success rates showed they matched those of naturally raised bears. Their ability to transition from rehabilitation to successful hunting is remarkable, he noted, reviewing the data. The cubs demonstrated growing proficiency in all survival skills, their behavior indistinguishable from bears raised entirely in the wild. They'd mastered fishing, foraging, and territory defense, guided by their mother's expert teaching. Martha spent hours documenting the bear's natural behaviors, her observations adding valuable context to the scientific data. "They've reclaimed their heritage," she said, watching through binoculars as the family foraged on a distant slope. The environmental restoration project expanded beyond the initial contamination sites, creating a comprehensive conservation program for the entire mountain range. The bears' crisis had sparked a lasting commitment to environmental stewardship. Tom coordinated with Forest Service teams to establish permanent wildlife corridors, ensuring safe passage for bears and other species throughout their habitat. The LISA project's success led to increased funding for wildlife protection initiatives. The mother bear's successful reintegration into the wild population particularly impressed researchers. Despite months of necessary human care, she maintained the complex social behaviors essential for survival in bear society. Dr. Cooper published preliminary findings in wildlife rehabilitation journals, sharing their innovative treatment protocols with the broader scientific community. Their methods promised to revolutionize approaches to wildlife recovery. Harrison brought news of similar rehabilitation projects starting in other regions, inspired by Pine Valley's success. "Your community proved it's possible to intervene without compromising wild instincts," he said. The remote cameras captured increasingly complex social interactions between the rehabilitated bears and the wild population. The family group navigated bear society with natural ease, establishing their place in the hierarchy. Sarah reviewed footage of the cubs practicing advanced hunting techniques, their movements showing the confidence of truly wild bears. Their successful rehabilitation represented hope for other compromised wildlife. The spring rains brought new growth to the restored habitats, supporting the bears' natural foraging patterns. The ecosystem's recovery matched the bears' own return to health, creating a sustainable environment for wildlife. Martha's deep knowledge of bear behavior helped the team interpret subtle aspects of the family's adaptation. "See how they respond to other bears?" she pointed out. "That's pure wild instinct at work." The success of their rehabilitation project attracted international attention. Conservation organizations studied their methods, recognizing the potential for similar programs worldwide. The mother bear established den sites throughout her territory, displaying natural seasonal movement patterns. Her behavior showed complete readaptation to wild living, her time in rehabilitation leaving no trace on her wild spirit. Tom's monitoring teams documented the bears' growing influence on their ecosystem. Their natural behaviors helped restore balance to the mountain environment, contributing to the health of the entire habitat. Dr. Cooper continued studying the long-term effects of their rehabilitation methods, gathering data to refine future wildlife recovery programs. The bears' success provided valuable insights into wildlife resilience. Local schools developed environmental education programs based on the bear's story, teaching students about wildlife conservation and environmental responsibility. The project created a lasting legacy of environmental awareness in Pine Valley. Sarah observed the bears from a distant ridge, watching them move through their natural habitat with powerful grace. Their journey from desperate survival to wild freedom embodied the success of their unprecedented intervention. The autumn colors blazed across Pine Valley as Sarah reviewed 6 months of post-release data in her ranger station. The success of their bear rehabilitation project had transformed not just the lives of 3 bears, but the entire community's approach to wildlife conservation. Dr. Cooper spread the latest research findings across her desk, his enthusiasm evident. As he pointed to key statistics, their survival rates match naturally raised bears exactly, he explained. The cubs are now fully independent, establishing their own territories just as they would in any wild bear family. The mother bear had become something of a legend in wildlife research circles. Her territory covered an expansive range of restored habitat, and remote cameras captured her confident navigation of the mountain ecosystem. She showed no trace of her near-death experience or rehabilitation period. Tom entered with fresh tracking data, mapping the bears' extensive movements through their mountain home. "Look at these foraging patterns," he indicated. "They're utilizing every aspect of the restored environment, even found evidence they've successfully denned for brief periods during cold snaps." Martha's continued observations provided valuable insights into the bears' social interactions with other wildlife. "Saw the mother bear respectfully yield territory to an older male yesterday," she reported. "Perfect natural behavior. She's teaching her cubs all the proper social cues." Mayor Chen arrived with news that would ensure the legacy of their project. "The state has officially designated our entire mountain range as a protected wildlife corridor," she announced. "The Pine Valley Protocol will be permanently enshrined in conservation law." Harrison shared updates from other rehabilitation projects that had adopted their methods. "Your success created a ripple effect," he explained. "Wildlife programs across the country are rethinking their approach to severe cases. The cubs, now nearly grown, had developed into magnificent examples of wild bears. Remote cameras captured them expertly, fishing in mountain streams, their technique matching that of bears who had never known human contact." Jack Weber's network of local observers reported increasing signs of healthy bear activity throughout the region. "The whole ecosystem is flourishing," he noted. "Other wildlife is returning to areas that were abandoned during the contamination period." Dr. Cooper continued analyzing data from their long-term monitoring program, documenting the bears' successful reintegration into the wild population. "Their ability to navigate complex social interactions with other bears is remarkable," he observed. Sarah organized a comprehensive presentation of their findings for an international wildlife conservation conference. Their project had sparked global interest in community-based approaches to wildlife rehabilitation, The environmental restoration efforts, triggered by the bears' crisis, had expanded far beyond the original contaminated sites. The mountain range now supported a thriving wildlife population, with the rehabilitated bears playing their natural role in the ecosystem. Martha spent hours documenting the bears' increasing influence on their habitat. "Watch how other animals respond to their presence," she pointed out. "They're recognized as legitimate members of the wild community." Tom coordinated with university researchers studying the long-term effects of their rehabilitation methods. The success of their approach challenged traditional beliefs about helping severely compromised wildlife. The mother bear's territory had become a focal point for studying healthy bear behavior. Her natural parenting skills and successful territory management provided valuable insights into wild bear society. Harrison brought reports from similar projects starting up in other regions. "Your community proved that intensive intervention can succeed without compromising wild instincts," he noted. "That's revolutionizing wildlife rehabilitation." The cubs demonstrated increasing sophistication in their hunting and foraging skills, their behavior indistinguishable from naturally raised bears. Remote cameras captured them successfully, hunting large prey and defending their territory. Dr. Cooper published comprehensive findings in major wildlife journals, sharing their innovative protocols with the scientific community. Their methods promised to save countless animal lives in future rehabilitation efforts. Mayor Chen worked with state officials to establish permanent funding for wildlife conservation initiatives. The bear's story had created lasting change in environmental policy and public awareness. The remote monitoring system provided unprecedented insights into wild bear behavior. Sarah reviewed footage of complex social interactions, territorial negotiations, and natural learning processes within the bear community. Martha's deep understanding of bear behavior helped interpret subtle aspects of their adaptation. "See how they respond to seasonal changes," she noted. "That's pure wild instinct guiding them." The autumn rains brought new growth to the restored habitats, supporting the bears' natural foraging patterns. Their successful rehabilitation represented hope for other compromised wildlife facing similar challenges. Tom's field teams documented the bears' growing mastery of their environment. They navigated challenging terrain, found hidden food sources, and maintained healthy boundaries with other wildlife. The success of their rehabilitation project attracted worldwide attention. Conservation organizations studied their methods, recognizing the potential for similar programs in other regions. Local schools developed environmental education programs based on the bear's story, teaching students about wildlife conservation and environmental responsibility. The project created a lasting legacy of environmental awareness in Pine Valley. Sarah observed the bears from a distant ridge, watching them move through their natural habitat with powerful grace. Their journey from desperate survival to wild freedom embodied the success of their unprecedented intervention. The mother bear's den sites showed expert selection and maintenance, displaying the full range of natural behaviors. Her recovery and return to the wild represented a perfect balance of human intervention and natural resilience. Harrison coordinated with international wildlife agencies interested in implementing similar rehabilitation programs. The Pine Valley Project had become a model for compassionate and effective wildlife conservation. The cubs' successful transition to independence marked the final validation of their rehabilitation methods. Their natural behavior and thriving. Condition proved that severe cases could be saved without compromising wild instincts. Dr. Cooper continued gathering data to refine future wildlife recovery programs. The bear's success provided valuable insights into the resilience of wild animals and the possibilities for human intervention. The community's transformed relationship with wildlife created lasting change in Pine Valley. Their successful rehabilitation project sparked a broader commitment to environmental stewardship and wildlife conservation. Martha's ongoing observations helped document the bears' lasting impact on their ecosystem. "They've become part of the mountain story," she said, watching them disappear into the autumn forest, just as nature intended. 1 year after the bears' dramatic rescue and rehabilitation, Pine Valley had transformed into an internationally recognized center for wildlife conservation. Sarah sat in the newly established Pine Valley Wildlife Research Center, surrounded by state-of-the-art monitoring equipment and a team of dedicated researchers. Dr. Cooper presented the final analysis of their groundbreaking project, his data revealing patterns that would shape wildlife rehabilitation for years to come. "The success rate exceeded all expectations," he explained, displaying comprehensive charts of the bears' progress. "They've not only survived, but thrived, proving intensive intervention can work." The mother bear had become a living legend among wildlife researchers. Remote cameras captured her teaching advanced survival skills to a new generation of cubs, her successful pregnancy marking the ultimate validation of their rehabilitation methods. Tom managed an expanded team of field researchers, coordinating studies across the restored mountain range. "Other species are following the bear's lead," he reported. "The ecosystem has reached a natural balance we haven't seen in decades." Martha's regular observations provided valuable context for the scientific data. "These mountains are alive again," she noted, her experienced eyes tracking subtle changes in wildlife behavior. The bears helped heal more than just themselves. Mayor Chen had successfully established permanent environmental protection measures for the region. "The Pine Valley Protocol is being adopted worldwide," she announced during their morning briefing. "Our community's response to those desperate bears changed the future of wildlife conservation." Harrison brought representatives from international wildlife organizations to study their methods. "Your project proved that compassionate intervention can succeed," he explained. "Communities around the world are implementing similar programs." The cubs, now fully grown, had established their own territories in the restored wilderness. Their behavior matched perfectly with naturally raised bears, showing no traces of their early brush with death or their time in rehabilitation. Jack Weber's network of citizen scientists had expanded into a comprehensive wildlife monitoring program. "We're seeing species return that haven't been documented here in 50 years, he reported, sharing photographs of renewed wildlife activity. Dr. Cooper published definitive research papers on their rehabilitation methods, his findings challenging traditional approaches to wildlife recovery. The key was supporting their natural instincts while providing necessary medical care, he explained to visiting researchers. Sarah coordinated with universities establishing permanent research programs in Pine Valley. Their success had sparked a revolution in wildlife rehabilitation, drawing students and scientists from around the world. The Environmental Restoration Project expanded beyond their original goals, creating a model for ecosystem recovery. The bears' crisis had initiated a comprehensive approach to habitat protection and wildlife conservation. Martha spent hours documenting the intricate relationships between restored wildlife populations. "Watch how they all interact," she pointed out. "Nature knows how to heal itself when we remove the obstacles." Tom supervised the installation of advanced monitoring systems throughout the mountain range. Their expanded research program provided unprecedented insights into wildlife behavior and ecosystem recovery. The mother bear's successful adaptation to wildlife had exceeded all expectations. Remote cameras captured her expertly managing her territory, teaching survival skills, and navigating complex social interactions with other bears. Harrison brought news of similar projects succeeding in other regions. "Your methods are saving wildlife populations worldwide," he reported. "The Pine Valley approach is becoming the gold standard for rehabilitation." The cubs demonstrated complete mastery of their wild environment, their behavior indistinguishable from any other wild bear. Their successful rehabilitation proved that even severely compromised animals could fully recover their natural instincts. Dr. Cooper's research program attracted leading wildlife experts eager to study their methods. The success of their approach revolutionized understanding of wildlife recovery and rehabilitation possibilities. Mayor Chen worked with international conservation organizations to establish permanent funding for wildlife programs. The bears' story had created lasting change in environmental policy and public awareness. The remote monitoring network provided unprecedented insights into healthy bear society. Sarah reviewed footage of complex social interactions, territory management, and natural learning processes within the wild population. Martha's deep knowledge of mountain wildlife helped interpret subtle aspects of ecosystem recovery. "See how everything's connected," she observed. "The bear's health reflects the health of the entire mountain." The restored habitats supported increasingly diverse wildlife populations. The bear's successful rehabilitation represented hope for endangered species worldwide facing similar environmental challenges. Tom's research teams documented the long-term impact of their conservation efforts. The mountain range had become a living laboratory for studying ecosystem recovery and wildlife rehabilitation. The success of their project attracted ongoing international attention. Conservation organizations worldwide adopted their methods, recognizing the potential for similar programs in diverse environments. Local schools expanded their environmental education programs, using the bear's story to teach future generations about wildlife conservation. The project created a lasting legacy of environmental stewardship in Pine Valley. Sarah observed the thriving bear population from research blinds throughout the mountain range. Their journey from crisis to recovery had transformed understanding of wildlife rehabilitation possibilities. The mother bear's new cubs represented the ultimate success of their intervention. Her ability to raise healthy offspring in the wild proved complete recovery of natural behaviors and instincts. Harrison coordinated with government agencies to establish permanent wildlife protection measures. The Pine Valley Project had become a model for effective conservation policy and community engagement. The original cubs' transition to independent life validated their rehabilitation methods, their natural behavior and successful integration into wild bear society proved the effectiveness of their approach. Dr. Cooper continued refining wildlife recovery protocols based on their experience. The bear's success provided valuable insights into wildlife resilience and rehabilitation possibilities. The community's transformed relationship with wildlife created lasting change in conservation practices. Their successful rehabilitation project sparked a global movement toward compassionate wildlife intervention. Martha's ongoing observations helped document the long-term impact of their work. "These mountains belong to the bears again," she said, watching new generations of wildlife thrive in the restored wilderness. The legacy of Pine Valley's Bear Rehabilitation Project echoed through the mountain community 5 years after that. Desperate winter night, Sarah walked through the expanded Wildlife Research Center, now a hub of international conservation efforts, remembering how it all began with 3 starving bears and a community's courage to help. Dr. Cooper presented long-term data to a group of visiting scientists, his research having established new standards in wildlife rehabilitation. The success of our original bears sparked a revolution in how we approach wildlife recovery, he explained, displaying comprehensive tracking data from multiple rehabilitation projects. The mother bear had become a living symbol of wildlife resilience. Remote cameras regularly captured her movements through the mountain range, now leading her 3rd set of cubs since release. Her success story inspired conservation efforts worldwide. Tom directed an international team of researchers studying the restored ecosystem. The environmental recovery spread far beyond our initial expectations, he reported, sharing data from monitoring stations throughout the mountain range. These bears helped heal an entire mountain. Martha's continued. Presence provided perspective on their achievement. "Remember that first night?" she asked, watching footage of healthy bears roaming their restored habitat. "We didn't just save 3 bears, we saved the heart of these mountains." Mayor Chen had successfully established Pine Valley as a global center for wildlife conservation. "Our community's response created a model for others to follow," she explained to visiting environmental officials. "We proved that compassionate intervention can succeed on a large scale." Harrison coordinated with international agencies implementing the Pine Valley Protocol in diverse environments. "Your methods have saved wildlife populations across 6 continents," he reported during their annual review meeting. "The impact keeps growing." The original cubs, now fully mature bears, had produced their own offspring. Their complete integration into wild bear society proved the lasting success of their rehabilitation methods. Remote cameras captured them, teaching survival skills to their own cubs. Jack Webber's citizen science program had evolved into a comprehensive ecosystem monitoring system. "We're documenting species interactions that haven't been seen in centuries," he announced, sharing data from their expanded observation network. Dr. Cooper's research findings continued influencing wildlife rehabilitation worldwide. The key insight was recognizing that medical intervention could support rather than suppress natural instincts, he explained to new students joining their program. Sarah managed an expanding network of wildlife recovery initiatives inspired by their success. Their methods had been adapted for various species, creating new possibilities for saving endangered populations. The Environmental Restoration Project transformed understanding of ecosystem recovery. The bears' crisis had initiated a comprehensive approach to habitat protection that showed remarkable results across diverse environments. Martha spent hours observing new generations of wildlife thriving in the restored wilderness. "Watch how naturally they move," she noted, tracking bear families through their mountain territory. "No trace of human intervention remains." Tom supervised advanced research projects studying long-term effects of their rehabilitation methods. Their success had sparked new questions about wildlife resilience and recovery possibilities. The mother bear's impact on wild bear society exceeded all expectations. She had become a dominant figure in the local bear population, her success demonstrating the complete restoration of natural behaviors and social skills. Harrison brought reports of similar projects succeeding in challenging environments. "Your methods work even in severely compromised ecosystems," he explained, sharing data from global rehabilitation efforts. The mountain range supported a thriving wildlife population, with restored habitats providing natural abundance. The bear's successful rehabilitation had initiated a cascade of positive changes throughout the ecosystem. Dr. Cooper's research program attracted leading scientists studying wildlife recovery. Their approach revolutionized understanding of animal rehabilitation and ecosystem restoration possibilities. Mayor Chen worked with international organizations to establish permanent conservation initiatives. The bear's story had created lasting change in environmental policy and public engagement with wildlife issues. The remote monitoring system provided unprecedented insights into healthy wildlife populations. Sarah reviewed decades of data showing the progressive recovery of natural behaviors and ecosystem balance. Martha's deep understanding of mountain wildlife helped document the extent of their success. "These bears aren't just surviving," she observed. "They're shaping the future of their species." The restored habitats supported increasingly complex wildlife interactions. Their successful rehabilitation project demonstrated the resilience of natural systems when given proper support and protection. Tom's research teams documented the expanding impact of their conservation efforts. The mountain range had become a living laboratory for studying ecosystem recovery and wildlife rehabilitation. The success of their project continued drawing international attention. Conservation organizations worldwide adapted their methods, creating new possibilities for wildlife recovery in diverse environments. Local schools developed advanced environmental education programs based on their experience. The project created a lasting legacy of conservation awareness and community engagement. Sarah observed new generations of wildlife thriving in their mountain home. Their journey from crisis to recovery had transformed understanding of what was possible in wildlife rehabilitation. The mother bear's multiple successful litters proved the completeness of her rehabilitation. Her offspring showed no traces of their family's brush with extinction, thriving as fully wild bears. Harrison coordinated with government agencies to expand wildlife protection measures. The Pine Valley Project had become a model for effective conservation policy and community-based environmental stewardship. The original cubs' successful transition to wildlife validated their rehabilitation methods. Their natural behavior and successful reproduction proved the lasting effectiveness of their approach. Dr. Cooper continued refining wildlife recovery protocols based on their experience. The bear's success provided valuable insights into wildlife resilience and rehabilitation possibilities. The community's transformed relationship with wildlife created lasting change in conservation practices. Their successful rehabilitation project sparked a global movement toward compassionate wildlife intervention. Martha's ongoing observations helped document the long-term impact of their work. "These mountains sing again," she said, watching bear. Families move freely through their restored wilderness home. The story of Pine Valley's bears had become a beacon of hope in wildlife conservation. Their journey from desperate survival to thriving freedom proved that with courage, compassion, and commitment, even the most challenging wildlife crises could be overcome. Their success challenged conventional wisdom about wildlife rehabilitation and inspired new approaches to conservation worldwide. The bears' legacy lived on in every successful wildlife recovery project that followed their groundbreaking methods. In the end, Pine Valley's extraordinary journey began with one desperate night and 3 starving bears. But it became something far greater, a testament to what happens when a community chooses compassion over fear, hope over doubt. Today, as Sarah watches new generations of bears roam freely through the restored wilderness, she remembers Martha's words from that first night. "The mountains belong to the bears first. We're just guests here." Some say you can still see the mother bear on quiet evenings, teaching her grand cubs the ancient ways of the wild, forever free and forever home.